Hey folks, I'm Chuck Black. We're doing 52 weeks of Python. We are in week number 48, and this week we are beginning our discussion of making a real live user interface. What I mean by that is not just doing terminal stuff for the output, but actually creating a browser-based front end. And so this involves a whole lot of work in order to make this happen, but it is way simpler than it used to be, and the functionality is way nicer than it used to be. So we will look into that. If you are interested in expanding your software skill set so that you can actually call yourself not only somebody who does scripts or copies and pastes, but has working knowledge not only of Python but of front-end stuff, then if you've added database knowledge, etc., you can call yourself a full-stack programmer, and those folks are quite big in demand these days. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to basically try to get ourselves launched and started in understanding what it takes to do something like this. This first lesson is going to take a while, but we're going to talk about things such as the advantages. Why would you be doing something like this when you could do a terminal like that? So why is this beneficial? We'll talk about our design and how our design of this mini Quokka is built such that we can put any type of display on top of it whenever we want or however we want. In fact, right here, you're looking at terminal and full-fledged front-end user interface in a browser display happening at the same time. And our little application doesn't care because everything is coming in via this REST API. So we're going to talk about the general design of user interfaces. So that includes the fact that we get our data from our Quokka server, and then this page, the structure of this page, is going to be given to us by a service which is running that provides all this nice React material UI, material table, all the nice stuff that you see here that makes the page look good and behave well. That's all part of this stuff right here, and all I'm using my Quokka server for is to get the actual data that you see in the columns. We will help you to get started, so we'll teach you how to create a new React app, which is basically I'm going to point you at create React app that's already been created for you, this discussion tutorial. So we will be doing that. We'll talk about what needs to be installed in order to make it happen, and there are a number of things in this whole JavaScript / front-end world that you need to be aware of. We will touch on IDEs. So what IDE are you going to use to edit your code? You could use PyCharm, but it doesn't really have JavaScript intelligence. If you want JavaScript with PyCharm, you need to get the for-pay version of PyCharm. You can get something like WebStorm, as I did, but that costs money, so you may not want to do that. You can look online and find dozens of free IDEs for JavaScript, so you'll have a number of choices in what to do there. And we will look at the basic code like you see right here that is actually serving up this page that you see, and how all you need to do is change any of this, and it will automatically reload and you'll have new data there. That's a lot of stuff. So there are a number of little small components, but as I say, this isn't a trivial undertaking. You'll have to be all in, sort of in investing in this. I suspect that we will have 2 lessons, this one and then the next one I will go through the code, and then we'll be back to Python stuff. But if you want to have get a head start or get on the on-ramp of understanding how user interfaces work and how we make these cool things happen, then keep listening and find out how to build our front end for our Quokka server. Okay, so let's get started talking about user interfaces. So in order to do that, I want us to see what we've got going on here on this screen. In other words, what's running. So up here, I have my Quokka server, and so yeah, that's running happily. I also have running this script that runs all of my monitoring. So it's running monitoring for hosts and for devices and for services, and it's also doing port scan. I'm going to do stop monitor all.sh, and it's asking me for my password. I know you couldn't see that. It was quite busy doing a bunch of stuff. So I've stopped it, so it's no longer going out and pulling the devices and updating the database. So that is now stopped. I'm going to stop my displays, which are running right now. So now these displays are all stopped, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the actual Quokka server that is running Flask. So at this point in time, I realized that I haven't really gone over, maybe I have, but I haven't emphasized it. So here I'm in my M08 concurrency. We're going to be teaching from module 9, but I'm running things from M08. I technically could be running it from M07 as well. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to be doing it from the M08 one where we added concurrency. Here's my command: export flask app equals quokka server.py, flask run minus port equals 5001. Some have asked, why are we running on 5001? And the answer is because I've been running sometimes both the original Quokka project code that I wrote, as well as this, what we've been calling mini Quokka. And so I need to have those running on separate ports by default. Quokka Flask runs on 5000, so I'm going to let Quokka use that, and this mini Quokka, I'm going to have it running on 5001. All that means is that these applications that are accessing the data need to be using that port. So I'm going to go ahead and start that, and at this point in time, my Quokka server, my Flask server is up and running, and now I will go ahead and run these. Now the commands for these are pretty simple. I'm in M08, remember, still for my terminal-based output. All I need to do here is say Python 3 space and then the name of the program, and the service data is service underscore display, and I'm going to run that. Now I'm getting that display. You may have seen this pop up. You can see I'm doing get services, so that's good. But getting back to what we were doing, in order to run the host display, as you might expect, I just do Python 3 host display, and that will get me up and running. And then for doing the devices, I'm going to be doing the same thing, Python 3 device display. This is the output that I have for my terminal-based output. And of course, now what I should do is I should start this up. So I'm going to do a run monitor all. That is going to actually start all of my monitoring. Let me show that to you. That is called run monitor all. So basically I do sudo Python 3 host monitor, sudo Python 3 host port scan. I need to do sudo for those because it's using nmap to do host discovery, so I need to be able to do that. For the device monitor, I'm just using napalm. I don't need sudo. For the service monitor, currently I'm just doing ping or HTTP, as you can see down here, or DNS or NTP, so none of those require sudo. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, if I can find the right command. And now it's off and running. You can see it's doing scanning. It's doing my services. You can see, yeah, these all turn out to be, the services response time was slow, probably because I had so much going on. The next time I do service status, when I come around to get that again, then these should go back, some of them to green anyway. Here you see that these have all turned bright green because the values are all new because I've been updating them. And over here, we see what I do over here is I highlight the version if it doesn't match, and you can see that as well. So these are all well and good. In terms of displaying data for you, that's perfectly okay. One of the limitations, and I know I could work around this, there are tools like Top and others that take input and allow me to do stuff, but There are ways that I could work around the idea of input, but it's just so much easier to have a web-based interface and allow me to click on things like actions. If you've seen the Quokka stuff that I did, I used to, at the beginning of the 52 weeks of Python, I used to highlight the functionality in Quokka that I had added, and I may add action buttons over here, but if I wanted to say do a packet capture on one of these and I had implemented it, then I would need to have a way to input that. If I was looking at hosts and I wanted to do a port scan to get all of the really juicy information about the host, then I could add those action buttons there. For services, if I wanted to do a trace route, I would have buttons over here, but I'm able to do that much easier here than it is over here. At least that's my opinion, and so that's what we'll be doing. That's one of the reasons that we want to go to a real user interface. Obviously, there's other advantages. I can run this user interface from anywhere that I want to run it. I can be on a different machine. I can be across the country. Yeah, there's just a whole lot of advantages to having a browser-based way of doing things. And so that, my friends, is what we are going to be moving towards, and I'm going to show you how we can do that in this lesson. Here's something else I may not have remembered to mention. I'm not sure that I did a good enough sell job on the value of user interfaces such as this. I did mention the accessibility of being able to get access to the user interface stuff from anywhere. A couple of things that I just wanted to point out just with this simple material table thing that we are using that gives us this output. One nice thing is that I can stretch it, which I couldn't do with the terminal window. I didn't handle that at all, so I can stretch it and I can shrink it until it gets to be just as compact as I can, and then go back a little bit and look at that. I can say I want you to show me 20 rows instead of 10 rows, and then I can make this actually bigger. If I had, yeah, this does fit, I think, the 20 rows in here, so this is actually pretty nice. Or you could do 5 rows if you wanted to. Another nice thing about this is the fact that, you know, what if I wanted to see all of the items organized by their status? So here I can see all of the failing nodes right at the very beginning, so that helps me to understand that. I can sort them by host name, so that can be handy, of course, sorting by IP address. Now I'm just doing an alphabetic or lexicographical sort here. I'm not trying to do an intelligent IP address sort, so you see 10, 11, 110, 122, etc. This is, and then down here 14, so this is not in numerical order intelligently by IP address. You could, of course, write something to do that. That wouldn't be too hard. MAC address if you wanted to. The other thing that I thought would be nice is what if I want to see all of the devices that have open ports, so it sorted that so I can see it. If I'm thinking, okay, well, I think there's a device that has Lenovo in it, and there you see I've sorted based on that. If I want to say, okay, don't I have Roku devices in here? Yeah, I can see I've got my 2 Roku devices, which, if you're not familiar with that, that's what we use here in the States. I'm not sure if it's elsewhere to make our TV smart and be able to connect to the internet and things like that. What about Amazon? There's an Amazon thing. What about a Google? There's a couple of Google things. What about this ESP? Those are my smart switches. So you just generally get the idea that, and I've kind of shown you all the functionality, but it is kind of handy. Of course, I couldn't do anything like that in my terminal windows, and that's a little bit unfortunate. And if you're thinking, well, another nice thing is that I can just bop back and forth to devices and then to hosts and then to services and see it all in the one screen. I don't have to have multiple screens. If you did want to have multiple screens, then of course you could do that. If you come here, I'm going to type in local host and it's going to connect to my web service. I'm hoping right now that I have it up and running. I can't remember if I do or not. Looks like I do. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I could now do something like this and snap that off, and I now have multiple things showing on my screen at one time. I can make this nice and wide because I like it to be just a single item on each row, and I can I can do these the appropriate size. I could do hosts as well if I wanted to. Anyway, you can do things similar to what I had before, but you get the added value of being able to sort, being able to search, being able to display different numbers of rows and do pagination and things of that nature. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. In general, obviously, these are better user interfaces than terminals in many ways, and so that's why we're taking this time out from our Python learning just to give you a little bit of understanding of how to build a front end. One thing I want to make sure I point out before we leave these terminal windows is this. Now I'm getting updated data. It's telling me that it's been updated at 12:10, at 12:10, at 12:11. So you see I'm getting this updated data, and I'm printing it out. And when I go over here, I can see that I've got the same thing. These are all 12:10, and they will be updated shortly as soon as I've gone out and gotten the new information. Now, the question might be, so is that like the same data? How is that happening? If you recall, we go back to this picture where I mentioned when we first were implementing this, and when I was doing Mongo and we added host scan and things of that nature, I mentioned one of the really nice things about this design is that I can swap out one of these displays and just put in a real user interface that's browser based, and it has way more capability, and I don't have to change anything. This Flask Quokka server doesn't change, my monitoring does not change, my database does not change. It's all entirely the same as it was before, and that's actually what we're seeing here. This data right here is actually the same data that is getting pulled from, and you can see it just updated there, 12:12. It's the same data as we're printing out right here. As soon as this goes through and updates, then you'll see that the data is actually the same, getting pulled from the same location. You can see it's all gone bright green, meaning that it's new. So it's all coming from the same thing. So basically, we have realized what I said was possible, which is we can swap one thing out and put something else in. In fact, in my situation right here, I haven't even swapped them out. I've got them both running at the same time. And because of this nice design, that's perfectly acceptable way to do things. But what we will be looking at is how can you migrate from, a more simple terminal-based way of doing things into the world of real legitimate browser-based user interface. And that's what we're going to look at now. So let's talk about how this user interface is implemented. Now, there are many ways to implement what is called a front end. I can pass data and the entire screen contents up to the browser, and it can be printed out, and then every time I want to refresh it, it can refresh the entire thing. Alternatively, I can pass the structure of the screen and only go and retrieve the data every time I want to update it. And the latter is what I have chosen to do. If you were to look up examples of Flask or Django or any of the other Python-based frameworks or even other frameworks, they will show you simple examples where they print out like a static web page. And that's perfectly okay for beginning, but we're actually trying to do something a little bit more robust and a little bit more real world like. And so if your goal is to become a knowledgeable and intelligent software developer and you want to add user interface skills to your skill set, then doing it in a more robust way, the way that I'm going to show you, is probably desirable. So that is what we have done. Now, what does that actually look like? Well, let me show you this picture. So this picture is a cool picture, if I do say so myself. It's available to you. All you have to do is go out to GitHub, to the Quokka wiki. So go to GitHub, chuck a black Quokka Wiki UI implementation. I've mentioned this many times in the class and in the Quokka walkthrough and other stuff. I'm using this as an example because this is the basic structure or design of the application is the same for Quokka as it is for our little user interface on top of our mini Quokka. And so let me talk in general about what this is so that you have an understanding of what we're doing. On the one hand, we have user interface pages. What I mean by that is this whole structure, meaning the fact that this is a table, the fact that there's something up here that with some words, the fact that there are buttons up here and a button here, and the fact that we're using this this library that has been open sourced and that I can use to print stuff out. I'm using all of that. All of that stuff is getting loaded from this user interface service that is running. And when you see Quokka here, localhost 3000, on port 3000, that is where this stuff here is running. Now, what about the data that actually goes into the pages? In other words, DNS via Google, 8.8.8.8, etc. Last heard, where does that come from? That data actually comes from our little Quokka server. So the Quokka thing that we're doing that we looked at in the slides, let's see, do I have this slide available still? This is not the slide that I was looking for. Let me find it. Things are a little bit slow because there's a lot going on my system, as you can imagine. This Quokka server, that's basically this thing right here. So we are using that to serve RESTful data back to our user interface. So do you have that? User interface pages and the whole structure of what you see are coming from this thing called Node.js, which is using a React framework which comes from Facebook, Material UI, which comes from Google. So I'm making use of those to give me the functionality for the structure of the page and for the look and feel of stuff. And then I have a little bit of code that I've added. So that is the pieces that are coming with respect to the pages. I'm going out using JavaScript in those pages to go and get RESTful data for hosts, for devices, for services. That is what is coming back. In the same way that these display functionality is making REST calls in order to get the data, I am doing exactly the same thing with my little browser application that is right here. So devices is you've seen that, I've just made a RESTful call to go get that data. Hosts, I again am making a RESTful call to get all the hosts. And for services, I've made a RESTful call to get all of the services that are out there. So that basically is what is going on. I've got two of these things going at once. That's the general design of what it is that's working in order to provide this. Next, I'm going to show you how you can get from nothing to this situation. So the question is, how can you as a software developer get from nothing when it comes to user interface stuff? Or maybe you've implemented these, that's certainly something and it's worthwhile, but you haven't done any of this inside a browser user interface front end type stuff before. How do you get from nothing to being able to have something like this? You basically have three different options. Maybe there's more than that, but I'm going to present to you three different options. One is you can start completely from scratch. When I built Quokka, the actual Quokka user interface, I had not ever built a web-based front end before. So this was brand new to me. I did not know JavaScript. I didn't know anything about the frameworks. I knew that React existed because I worked on projects that used React. I knew about Angular, which is Google's framework. So I knew that those all existed, but I didn't really have any experience. So what did I do in order to do it? Well, I looked it up online and I found on this React website that there's a page that says, here's how you can create a new React app. And so a lot of these things in software where you want to build something and get started. Getting started is the hardest part. And so people who provide software frameworks and such often provide a way to get things going. I've done that with Flask. I've done it with other software as well. And I've now done it with front-end stuff. And so I came down here and I read this about creating a new React app. They talked about different ways to do it. One of the ways is via create React app. That is actually what I did. I followed this little process, which is very tiny, but it gives you the framework of your React application. And then I built Quokka from there. So I extended things I read about how you're supposed to do it. So that would be one way. If you want to learn it all from scratch, and if you're going to dive kind of not so much into the deep end, but you'd really want to go down the path of learning and understanding this stuff, maybe that will be the way to do it for you. A second way to do it would be to go, and I'm going to pretend that this is the real Quokka, the thing that's out there under my Quokka GitHub repository. You could take what I've done out there, which is richer than this and has a lot more functionality, and you could take that and you could try to plant it on top of our little mini Quokka. Now you'd need to make changes. In fact, when I did this implementation right here, that's exactly what I did. I took what I had done for Quokka, and then I just tore out all the stuff that I was no longer going to use, and that is what you will end up seeing. And that is the third option I'm going to show you, and that is here in our repository for Python 52 weeks. I suspect you've been going out and getting updates of my code to use to compare against the code that you are writing. You can actually go out and you can see M09. I have M09 server, which I'm not even sure. I'm not even running that one right now. I think I've added concurrency to M08, so I'll probably throw all of this away and just copy in my concurrency Quokka into here, because it's not really, I'm not really doing any work here. I'm just doing work on the front end side. But the M09 UI has all of this stuff. So this is stuff that I copied. You can see there's a lot of it that I copied from, and this includes everything down to right here. So from here, yeah, you can kind of see, if we just look in my source, in my UI directory, I have .idea, node modules, public source, all of this stuff, right, all the way down to there. That is stuff that is from my Quokka that I built using Create React App. The good news is it's only a very small amount of stuff that you have to modify, and it is all in here. And that's what I'm going to go through when I show you the code. There's basically 4 files that are of interest to you, 4 JavaScript files, and we're going to be looking at those. And that's all you really need to worry about. And as you can imagine, I've got devices, hosts, services. That's reflected in this that you've got right here. I can look at my devices screen. I can look at my host screen. I can look at my services screen. That is that's coming from this data right here. The dashboard and the dashboard app bar, as you might imagine, the dashboard is kind of this entire thing, and the dashboard app bar is this thing here at the top. And we'll look at the small amount of code that I use to do that. Now, you may be thinking, hang on a minute there, Chuck, I thought you told us that copying and pasting stuff was a bad idea. And in fact, if you're going online and finding examples of code and just doing a copy and paste and not learning what it is, then that is definitely a bad idea, and I recommend against that. However, many times, and I've done this myself, and you can see that I've done it right here with M09 server, I will take what I've already done, and this is the best example here, this user interface stuff. I'll take what I've already done or what somebody else has done and just copy it in so that I can follow the pattern, and that's what I did here. I copied in this code, and then I've gotten rid of about probably 3/4 of it. That's part of Quokka, the larger Quokka, the Quokka project, and I've simplified it for this teaching class. And so you will end up doing that a lot in your software life. So copy and paste is not necessarily a bad thing. I know I posted a joke on Twitter about Stack Overflow limiting the number of copy and paste, and that's a funny meme, and it's true that you shouldn't just be a copy and paster, but you will see lots of times when you will, in order to follow a pattern, you'll take some existing code and then you'll kind of tear it apart and rework it for your own needs. And that's what I did, and that's what I'm going to describe. So I'm not going to go through creating it from scratch. I've got information in the Quokka walkthrough. There's a little bit of information about the user interface there, but I also don't go through it. I think that if you look at what is suggested in the Create React app, and I actually recommend doing this for your own edification. If you're interested in this, just create your own and see what it gives you. And then you can compare it to this, and what you'll see is that a lot of this stuff is going to be the same, but there won't be any interesting components. That's where I added stuff. All right, so now let's look at the code that actually implements this stuff. Okay, so I've had another think about this overnight, and I do believe that it's going to be helpful to you to go through the creation of a new React application process, if only to just create your initial React app, and then you can copy over, say, the mini Quokka stuff that I've done in the Python 52 weeks repository, or you can give a shot at doing the full-blown Quokka user interface stuff. But I do think that this is useful. It's pretty trivial. It helps you to go through just a really quick process. It does help you to see what actually is going on. So here you can see M09 UI is where I have everything running with the source code that I was mentioning, devices, hosts, services, dashboard, etc. But I created another one called M09 UI2 in which I just ran create React app. I'll probably get rid of this before I save it, but all it has is just the super basics, and I will point that out, what you get with it, in a moment. But I do think that it would be useful for you to do that. Now, in order to do that, it does go through what you'll be doing. Remember, is and don't get hung up by words about tool chains, but the thing that you should consider is the one that I did, which is if you're learning React or creating a new single page app. Well, we're not doing a single page app because we're going to extend it, but we are learning React. So this is what I did to start all of the Quokka stuff, and that's the basis for what you see over here, the simplified version that we're using with our mini Quokka. So if you go down here to create React app, that's this thing right here. All it basically does is it tells you need to have Node.js installed and npm installed, and then all you do is this. And at that point in time, you have a full-blown React application. It will come up in the browser when you look at my speeded up version of doing this, which includes a bunch of installation of this stuff. Then you'll see how easy it is. And so that's all good. Now, before you do that, I did want to go over some stuff just so that you're aware for the Quokka that I've got running here, what you need to have installed. So what I've done is I've gone back into my history and looked at my installation of npm. So you are going to have to do this line here to install npm. And in addition to that, you are going to need to install Node.js. It's been long enough ago that I can't remember the order. I see that this is 1956 and that's 1962 in terms of the order, so it may be that you do Node.js first. I really don't know, but you do need to have both of these, and you install them using sudo apt-get install, just like we've been installing stuff on your Linux system. If you're on a different OS, then you need to follow the instructions for Node.js and for npm, how you install it. on your system. Now, from that point in time, you're able to install things using npm. And so this is the Node package manager. It's similar to when you do apt-get, the different ways of managing packages. I don't even know if it stands for Node Package Manager. I've never actually looked it up, but I'm assuming that it does, or it's something similar to that. You can look that up. But the things that I realized that I needed, I have a list of them here. What I've done over here on the left is I've done an npm list, and this is sensitive to who you're logged in as and the directory in which you're running. And like I've said before, I am pretty much a novice when it comes to front-end stuff. I'm able to do things like this and then the full Quokka with more interesting stuff, but I'm not an expert, and I haven't been writing actually production code ever in all of this stuff. But I did do an npm list which shows me what has been installed, and so you can see I've installed Material UI /core, and down here you can see npm install Material UI /core. You have Material UI icons. That's this one that you see right here, Material UI icons. You can see Material Table. That's the thing that gives me this functionality. It's not from Google. Somebody wrote this to run on top of Material UI. So there's should be in my list of all of the things that I've installed here. Let's see. I guess, you know what? I may have installed it on a different in a different window that I then closed and lost it. That's a unique and unfortunate aspect of history on Ubuntu, and that is that it doesn't store all of the things that you've done. Whatever window you closed last, it remembers that. So as you can see, I don't actually have Material Table in here, but you will need to install Material Table. React Charts, I'm not using any charts in this, so you don't have to do that. React Diff Viewer, that's what I used when I did the config diff, and so I'm not doing that here. React DOM, I am importing that. React Scripts, you will need that. React Vis, this is something that is from, I think I mentioned it was from Uber, that they contributed this. That's where I get my graphs in the Quokka product. I'm not using those here, so you don't really need those. Of course, you'll need to install React. You can see React right here. And Typeface Roboto, I think that is what Google's Material UI favors. So I think you get that by doing install topography. So I'm not 100% sure on all of these things. When we look at the code, you'll see what gets included, and then you'll know what needs to be installed if I've missed anything or if something is superfluous there. So I think the next thing is a sped up version of me running Create React App and showing you just a little bit about what I did. And then when we're done with that, we will begin to look at the code. Oh, hey, there's one thing I forgot. If you want to see the list of everything that I have installed for my Quokka stuff, that it would be all the user interface stuff, I'm going to go to my GitHub wiki for Quokka, and I'm going to navigate down to the bottom of this first page. And at the bottom of this first page, I have something that I try to keep updated. I'm not sure that I'm 100% up to date, but this has all of the stuff that I have installed in order for my Quokka app to run. Now, most of it has to do with databases and writing Python code, but you can see here are a couple of things. That's the Node.js and npm that I mentioned that you need to install using apt. And then down here under npm, I have a list of all of the things that I have installed. And you'll notice one comment here, React Scripts, but this is basically what we talked about. NPX is required. You need to do React -DOM. You need to do topography, Material UI core, and icons. React Scripts, make sure you're installing this from your directory in which you are going to be running your user interface stuff where you run npm start. This is for the graphs. So this React Vis is for the graphs. This is for the material table. That's what we see here. Typeface Frabato is what installed. That's what Google likes to have for its look and feel. And then the diff viewer, as I mentioned, was for doing the config diff part of Quokka, and we don't have that in our little one. But that's another place that you can find information about what you should be installing. Okay, so now I'm going to run create React app, and it's going to create everything for me. Just in case you think that your eyes are deceiving you, I neither type that fast nor does the output come this fast, but I've sped it up and I'm narrating over the top of it so that you don't have to wait throughout all of this long process. So what React is going to do with this create React app is it's going to create the entire framework that's necessary for me to have a full-fledged application that will present data on the web browser. And so that's pretty amazing, all the things that it does for us. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to start it, but it's going to fail because I already have Quokka running. So I'm going to go and shut down Quokka and then do npm start again. And now it's going to pop up the page that shows the result of create React app. It's just pretty boring there, but what it says is that I can edit app.js. So I'm going to go in and do that, get in the right directory. I'm going to use VI to edit it. I'm going to change the text to have hello to myself. And when we look back at the browser, it will have been changed. Okay, so we want to look at the code. In order to do that, we need to figure out how are we going to look at that code. So one option would be to look at it in PyCharm. So we've got PyCharm. This is my PyCharm with all of my Python code in it. Can I look at UI code in PyCharm? And the answer is yes, I can. Then the question is, am I going to like it? And the answer to that is probably not very much. So here you see PyCharm attempting to render the code that I've written. Now this is perfectly okay. It actually is smart enough to know a couple of things. For one, it knows that certain things are strings, and so it color codes strings in green. It also is aware of certain special characters like curly brackets. It's aware of those. It's aware of square brackets. It's aware of round brackets. So it can help me out a little bit with that. It's even aware of certain keywords. So it's aware of something called this, and it's aware of a if statement, etc. But that's about it. It doesn't really go much beyond that in terms of helping me understand if my JavaScript code is any good. So we may want to do something different in order to look at this. Now, one thing that you might be tempted to do is say, surely there is a JavaScript plugin for PyCharm, and the great news is, yes, there is. The not so great news is you need to actually have the purchased version of PyCharm. That would be PyCharm Professional. So if you want to go down and do the PyCharm Professional thing, then you can do that and pay whatever amount it is, or you could use it as a free trial for a certain amount of time. But that's probably not what we're going to do. Now, another thing you can do is look up best JavaScript IDE, or you could add free to that if you want. Some of these are free. Many of them have free versions. Since WebStorm is from the same people that gave us PyCharm, I had hoped that there was a free version of it. There was not, so I ended up just purchasing it just because. So I've been using WebStorm, as you can see here, and I will show you the code in WebStorm, not because I'm promoting it per se, but just because I have it. There's a number of other ones. Different people will have their 10 best JavaScript IDEs, 6 best JavaScript IDEs, top 5 JavaScript IDEs, 15 best, so you can go through and Google this yourself and figure out which one is appropriate for you. Some of them are more minimalist and some of them are more feature rich, but that would be something that is entirely up to you. So understanding that is going to be something that you'll need to do. And so now let's look at this code, but let's look at it in WebStorm. Okay, so as you can see, I've got WebStorm started, and I'm actually showing the same file that I edited when I did the Create React app. Remember, we're just looking at this Create React app code that was created. So my M09 UI is the stuff that I did to render Marquaka and all of that nice stuff. But what we're looking at right now is the code that just rendered basically this type thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run this. Let's see, npm start. It's going to run it, and the first thing that it's going to do, it's going to realize that, hey, port that I normally use is currently occupied, and actually it's smart enough to figure out that it's in M09 UI is where it's having a problem. So it can't run on port 3000. Do you want to run on another port? I'm going to say yes. And so what it's going to do is it's going to start the development server. You can see I have an old one of these sitting around, so I'm going to get rid of this old one. And it's going to load up this page that will say basically what we saw in the speeded up version, which is hello Chuck, etc. Now, one of the nice things about this is that I can modify it. So I'm going to modify it to something different and just get out of there, let it change it, and what's going to end up happening, you can see it recompiled it, and when I go back here, yeah, it's already made that change. So you can see you make changes to the code and it is smart enough to detect, oh, a file has been changed, I'm going to do that. So that's a real handy thing during development. So let's take a look at the code really quickly, and this is the last thing we will have time for here. This is my Quokka UI. All of this was created automatically for me. I did not touch any of this. Everything in node modules, everything in public, all of these package lock, readme, etc. that was created, including the stuff that is in source. So here you see I have this source stuff, and actually the code we saw that we're looking at right now is app.js, and you may say, well, how does that magically get started? You may be familiar with the idea of index being the thing that gets popped up whenever you start a web page from a certain web directory. And here's my index.js, and let's just look at this really quick. So I've got React that I'm importing. I've got React DOM that I'm importing. There's a file called index.css. There's this thing called app. So this is something that got added that is a special file that actually helps us to have this screen right here. So that they added that, but it is something that is not, it's not an installed thing. It was created by Create React app. And that's this code right here. And then report web vitals. I have no idea what that is. This is just for measuring performance. Yeah, so we don't really care about that. Here is the base code that's going to get executed, and we'll see this in my application that does this as well. There's nothing that's going to change there. The one thing that, and you don't need to understand all of the different stuff that's getting done by React. You don't have to understand behind the scenes what's being done by Material UI. When we get to that part of it, there's a whole lot of code that is running that does stuff, but this is what you need to begin to understand and recognize as a pattern. You're going to see inside these angled brackets, the less than and greater than sign, a tag that is going to be the name of the thing that you are referencing. See this here? We're importing app, and it's going to be imported from up there. What is app? Well, we're going to go to this. I believe because I'm in WebStorm, I can do Control B, and it takes me there automatically. Now, this is a function. I will use classes in the code that we do as well as functions, but it's just a JavaScript function. And what is this JavaScript function? If you look at this, and I'm just going to give you a teaser about stuff, you're going to look at this and say, well, okay, that's JavaScript. I understand that. Oh, it's a return statement. I understand that. parentheses, I kind of get the idea that I'm going to be returning some stuff. And then you look in here and you say, what the heck is HTML stuff doing inside of this return statement? This is how React works. It combines JavaScript with HTML. So the stuff that I am returning is going to be HTML for some of it, and some of it, as we will see, is going to end up being JavaScript code. So just bear that in mind when we get to look at the real code, which we'll do in the next lesson when we look at, in fact, why don't I just pop one of these up? I'm going to go into source, and then I'm going to look at components. And here in my components, I'll look at hosts because that tends to be an interesting one. And you can see here I'm using React from React. I'm using button from Material UI. I'm using grid from Material UI. I'm using typeface Roboto. That gets used behind the scenes. Check circle icon is an icon that I use for this thing over here on the left. So check circle, and then I have an X, a cancel button. I'm using colors, and I'm using material table. That's what I'm using. As I said, this is going to be a class. And then what's going to be in here? This is going to be my class definition. Here's the constructor, which is going to be JavaScript type code. And when we get down here to our render function, we are going to do a return. And in here, you're going to see a combination of HTML as well as some stuff that is going to be included in curly brackets, which is going to be referencing JavaScript stuff. So you'll see a combination of both. You'll see if statements down here that's going to be like JavaScript. And again, it's surrounded by these curly brackets. So there's going to be a combination of stuff going on, and that's what we'll be looking at next time. But the good news is you already have your first React app. You know how to run it. And if you do end up in that situation where it says somebody's already running on port 3000, you can either bring down your Quokka. I don't recall if we showed this at the beginning. Maybe we did, but here's my Flask service that's running. And also I have, it's running on 3000. This is the thing that's serving up the Quokka pages. And this one down here is serving up my little tiny React app. And so, yeah, that's what's going on. And that is what we will be looking into, is this type stuff. We'll start at the top. We'll start at this index, and we'll see that instead of calling app, we're going to go down to dashboard. And when we look at dashboard, we're going to see a bunch of dashboard stuff. And once we come down to dashboard, we're going to see, oh, we're either going to go to devices, which is that, or we're going to go to hosts, which we did, or to services. And that, my friends, is what you see here: devices, hosts, services. That's how I am able to bop between one and the other of these. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of the simplicity of getting it started, how much is already done for you. And next time we will begin to dive into the code that actually does our Quokka or mini Quokka user interface. Okay, so let's review what we talked about. And frankly, there was a lot of different things that we talked about. I had to write it all down just so I remember to mention all the things. The first thing we talked about is, why would we do a browser-based real user interface? This looks pretty cool, I think you'll admit. But there are limitations, not only the fact that you can get at it from anywhere because it is browser-based. You can stretch it and shrink it. You can sort it based on different items here. You can search for different things. There are a lot of advantages. Another thing that I didn't actually build into this user interface, but we can have actions where you click on something and it goes and does a particular act, and that's not as easily possible down here in the terminal type way of doing things. So we did talk about that. We also talked about the fact that the way that we built our mini Quokka, this Quokka server that you see right here with REST APIs, is such that we can swap out these displays, these terminal displays, and replace them with user interface that's browser-based. And in fact, in this example, we're using both of them at once. So we are actually looking at the same data, but using two different interfaces. So that's kind of nice and a nice ability to do that. We did talk about the design. How did we build this? And we opted not to do a trivial, super simple way of doing things because teaching you to do it the right way seems to be a better idea, even if you don't begin immediately to build them. If you have this understanding of how things tend to work, then you will understand user interfaces much better. And that is the design that we use, wherein we have this web server running that is serving up the page, the actual structure of the page, and then we actually get the data from our Quokka server. So there's two servers that are giving data. This gives the page structure and layout, and this gives the data that goes within it. We talked about how to get started. So we said, well, you can go here and do this create a new React app. There are some things that you will need to make sure you have installed, but creating React app is pretty straightforward, and yeah, all you really need to do is this. And so we talked about how that is a very useful way to get started, and I recommended that everybody do that. I also went through some time talking about what you need to install. So we went to the wiki page and we looked at some terminal windows that showed you the various stuff that would need to be installed. I'm not going to go through all of that right now. So after we talked about that and we built our React app, we actually have a React app that's up and running. We talked about how that works. We edited this using VI and saw that it immediately refreshed itself with the new data. So that's actually pretty nice that we were able to do that. We then said, okay, well, let's look at the code. In order to do that, we needed to choose an IDE. And I mentioned that I am using WebStorm just because this happens to be what I purchased. It does cost money. There are many other IDEs for JavaScript that are out there that I suspect will do maybe not quite as good a job as WebStorm, but will do certainly an adequate one. So I think you should probably look into that. And then we looked a little bit at the code just really quickly. We looked at our app.js. Remember, this is the one that we're looking at. This is the one that we'll be talking about next time. So we looked at this little app.js and saw the code in here. And we looked at index.js and saw that it referenced app. And then I mentioned that this is what we'll be doing in the future. When we go down and we begin to have our index.js is going to point at our dashboard, and the dashboard is going to point at our services and our devices and hosts. And that's what we went over. So stick around for next time when I go into all this crazy JavaScript and HTML code and explain to you how it all works and how it does what it does. As always, if you have questions, just let me know. Till the next time, thanks for listening.